All Here is Spirit by Sri Aurobindo. All here is spirit, self-moved eternally. For matter is its seeming or its form, a finite motion of infinity built up by energy's electric storm, a flux of solid instability whirled into shape by a tremendous force that labors out the world's fabric endlessly, creates and then destroys without remorse. Titan and warm, the dewdrop and the sea are fragile bodies like the Aeon star, but through it all remains immortality. It remains immortally, the secret spirit we forever are. Matter is spirit's semblance glamorous, self-woven for its own field and robe and house. All right, so that was a poem called All Here is Spirit by the poet, philosopher, and yogi, Indian guy named Sri Aurobindo. If you did not understand what that meant, don't worry. A lot of people don't. But I figured this is related to what we're going to talk about today. But before I get started with that, let me talk about the typical spiel. You're listening to SG2 in Space, which is on every Wednesday night from 6:30 to 7 U.S. Central Live. So you can go to facebook.com/The Shen Show. That was the former name. It's the only weekly space show in Houston, probably the only weekly one in Texas. Feel free to support the show at patreon.com/SG2 on space. That's SG with a number 2 on space. Okay, so without any further ado, let me relate the topic. Today, we're actually going to talk about a topic that was brought up by my lovely co-host, Leonard Kramer. There you go. Wow. All right. So, hey, Leonard, what is that that you're wearing?
Oh, this?
Yeah.
This is a shirt. No, you mean the cravat? This is a cravat.
A cravat. Got it.
Yeah, come on.
All right. All right. So Leonard's wearing a cravat with his tie-dye.
It's a kind of tie. Yeah.
So we brought up last time that we wanted to talk about consciousness. Particularly, you might be thinking, okay, how does that relate to anything we typically talk about, which is space and all that physics stuff? Well, it turns out that one way, right, consciousness is one of those great mysteries, right? Apparently, there's a number of theories out there which can relate quantum mechanics to consciousness. And this is something which Leonard brought up, particularly relating to Roger Penrose, and he's a famous British physicist. We talked about him last time. So, but before we get all into that, Leonard, let me ask you this. What exactly, maybe in your definition, or perhaps these physicists' definition, is consciousness? Like, what is that? Does anyone know?
I have spent some time trying to think about that, actually. What is consciousness? I mean, it's it could be like self-awareness, awareness of ourself, but we also have this sense that our pets are conscious, that animals are conscious, but say a toothbrush is not conscious. All right, so I can't really do any better than that. I guess maybe some philosophers. We're not really going to be talking about philosophy, all right, but we kind of fringe on it a little bit. Descartes talked about, he went through this sort of debate with himself about who am I? I think, therefore I am, and so forth. So that's kind of, I think we know what conscious means, but some people think that animals are conscious. I think they are. I think a dog is conscious. I think maybe some people even think plants are conscious. So it has to do with a deliberation ability to function in that respect.
That's a pretty good definition, I feel like. So our friend Roger Penrose actually talked about it as well. And here's a little short clip
Oh,
where
okay.
he hopefully it pulls up on the screen, where he I guess he likes these slides or whatever you call it, like, and he just
He's
writes on.
old-fashioned. Yeah,
He's old fashioned. There you go.
yeah, but he's
Yeah.
also artistic. He's an artistic character. So
So there we go.
Point to three words here: understanding, and here we have awareness, and there we have intelligence. And in normal usage of the word intelligence, you'd have to say an object could only be considered intelligent if it does have this quality of understanding. And if an object is not aware of anything, you wouldn't normally say it has understanding. That's just normal usage of words. And I'm going to say, therefore, that understanding is crucial. It's crucial that both of these things. Can we have the next slide?
Okay, so
position, which to some extent,
yeah,
the chess problem is actually quite interesting, by the way. Unfortunately, for the sake of time, we're not going to show the entirety of that. Leonard, what do you think of his definition, where apparently he stresses the fact of understanding, whatever that means?
That something can a factor of understanding. He goes on to talk about in other places. He's mentioned how wild dogs can, when they're hunting, can think. They seem to be thinking about, one group will go in one direction, another one will go in another place, and the dogs will drive the game toward the other group, and other examples like that. And so understanding is sort of what he's talking about, and I think we have an intuitive sense of that. But what he points out is that the brain, we ordinarily think of the brain as a computer, which means that it does computations. Well, when we're doing a computation, we have lines of code, or mathematicians will have proofs, and there'll be a line of proof, and you'll go, all right, I understand what this proof says, and then that leads me to this next proposition, and then a proof, and then I'll look at that and I'll go, is that right? Yeah, okay. So, and then you go through maybe hundreds and hundreds of lines. The same thing with the computer code. And so you understand that each of the lines gives you a proof that you believe to be true, and then the output is something that you then believe. But there's something more than just, there's some meta phenomenon associated with what is true, that sort of oversees or is on top of the entire aspect that has to do with understanding. And he has he's trying to come to some kind of explanation for that, and he's even thinking that we need some kind of physics to make that make sense. So it's very interesting, and he gets down to some structures in the nervous system.
Yeah. So this, by the way, for everyone listening, is there's Roger Penrose is not the only one. This overall is called quantum consciousness, and it's a group of hypotheses proposing that quantum mechanical phenomena such as entanglement and superposition may play a vital part in the brain's function and could explain consciousness. Before we go on, Leonard, can you quickly explain what entanglement and superposition is, and like how's that very different from what we classically understand?
Well, in quantum mechanics is the theory of or the physics of how subatomic particles interact with each other, and it's responsible for the structure of molecules and electricity and light and so forth. There is a concept called entanglement, where in the vacuum or in nature, there are subatomic particles that are constantly being produced, and then they're produced and then annihilated. And so so these are said to be entangled, and so that a certain kind of operator on one particle then has an influence on the other particle in a way that is not understood. Your list, or the folks watching and listening might relate to the Einstein's aphorism that said, spooky action at a distance. So they were
Right.
he and it also has to do with the Schrodinger's cat, which is said to be dead and alive at the same time. So that's what entanglement is.
Speaking of Schrodinger's cat, excuse me, the other major part of quantum mechanics is superposition, where instead of a classical system where it's either, say, on or off or 0 or 1, quantum mechanics, it actually is probability. So it's a combination of all possibilities, or both possibilities at once, so to speak.
Correct.
And
yes.
You do not know, or rather, nothing is set in stone until an observer, whatever that means, observes it. And then in the typical explanation of quantum mechanics, which we will dive into some other time, they assume that this probability function somehow collapses. And so when you observe it, it only collapses to one possibility, one state. So
right, and the notion that the observer does this was the classical version that was attributed to Bohr and what was known as Copenhagen interpretation. That's no longer thought to be a realistic view of reality, and it's become important because cosmologists are now trying to combine gravity with quantum mechanics, and so we really need to understand the underlying reality. We need to reduce it to something that makes more sense. And so there are other aspects of it. One of them is many worlds, which and the other one is this notion of decoherence, which is really my favorite. But what Penrose was trying to come to was that he's uncomfortable with this idea that we are machines, because there's a lot of work being done in artificial intelligence and getting computers to play to play chess and so forth, and it's hard to understand what it seems like our brains do something different than what a computer does. And he's trying to introduce the random elements that are associated with quantum mechanics in the neurobiology of the brain, and he thinks he's discovered these microtubules that.
So before we talk about the microtubules, from what I understand, okay, so this is so he wrote a book, his first book on consciousness, which I have not read, but you might have, Leonard, called The Emperor's New Mind, written back in 1989. So he wrote that one might speculate that somewhere deep in the brain, cells are to be found of single quantum sensitivity. If this proves to be the case, then quantum mechanics will be significantly involved in brain activity. So you're right, Leonard. As he also mentioned, Leonard, he was not happy with all the what's the point? We're not like a computer. So he basically said that it sounds like really weird, but okay, I don't even know if this is completely understandable to our listeners, but he suggested that each quantum superposition has its own piece of space-time curvature, and that when those become separated by more than one Planck length, they become unstable and they collapse. So there's this type of quantum behavior, and this essentially is not is neither pure randomness nor algorithmic processing like a computer would do.
Right.
So it's completely
Right.
different.
So yeah, he seems right that we do seem to be able to do something other than just, act like robots. We're not. He's suggesting that. I don't think he's got it completely pinned down, and he confesses that as much. But they have identified these structures in the nerves, in all of our nerves, that that are able to express quantum transitions, and so.
Indeed.
That's the essence of the theory. Yeah.
Okay. I do need to mention that it's not just Penrose that developed this particular theory. He's also working this theory, by the way, is called orchestrated objective reduction, ORC-OR. He's also working ORCH. He's also working with an anesthesiologist, Stuart Hameroff, who whereas Penrose has a physics background, Hameroff has the biology background, and so Hameroff actually developed this hypothesis independently, since he's also interested in consciousness. And then Hameroff found Penrose, and they collaborated. So, what exactly is it? Well, there's a little short clip that we're going to play. This is Hameroff, Dr. Hameroff, explaining what he thinks is.
Aromatic groups are very similar to aromatic groups in tubulin, and I'll come back to that point. So basically what we wanted to do was take the space-time qubit that Roger had described, where position of a particle is equated to its curvature in space-time, and a superposition would be a separation of those curvatures. And you can imagine that were these curvatures to continue without collapse, that each would form its own universe, and you get multiple worlds. But we wanted to equate that. Of course, that doesn't happen because of objective reduction, or at least we don't think so. And we wanted to equate that to a qubit, a quantum bit in tubulin. Now, quantum bit in quantum computing means that information can be not just 1 or 0, but 1 and 0 superposition, and then collapse to one or the other as the solution. So we needed a qubit in the brain, and specifically based on tubulin pathways, not just individual. Initially, we said each tubulin was a qubit, but this allows you to avoid decoherence, because the tubulin pathway is error correcting. So the task before us to develop a theory was to define the quantum bits or qubits in microtubules, and I just showed you that with the pathway, and apply E sub G equals H bar over T, which Roger mentioned, to microtubules to quantify ORC-OR conscious moment. And we also wanted to test sensitivity of microtubule quantum processes to anesthesia, which would presumably dampen the quantum processes, and psychedelics, which might be expected to enhance the quantum process in some way, and to show how ORC-OR can account for EEG and other correlates of consciousness. So the basic.
Okay. So that's great. Now, I don't know much about biology, but apparently there's these structures in the brain called microtubules, however you pronounce it.
Tubules.
Tubules that could be suitable hosts for these quantum behaviors. From what little I have read, they're made of protein. Yeah, they're made of various proteins. And each of these, protein structures have hydrophobic pockets that are 8 nanometers apart, which is apparently small enough of a distance that quantum phenomenon could take place. And they may contain these what's known as pi electrons, like pi bonds. These are covalent chemical bonds. Any case. So he proposed, and Penrose and him proposed, that these electrons are close enough to become entangled, and hence tie in with the superposition as that diagram showed.
Right, and the important thing about this is that the other thing about quantum mechanics is that the universe, nature seems to produce random numbers. Right, so these are things that occur I don't know. The randomness of quantum mechanics has to do with the probabilities and so forth, and so they have this idea that this is going on all the time in every nerve cell, that it's integrated into the transmission of information in every nerve cell. Right. So and there are some phenomenon that he refers to that seem to show that the classical view of like a what's called, we could talk someday about, neural networks and how those are implemented in software, that there's some significant deviations between how the classical or the usual explanation for how nerves work and the actual measurements. So there's some other things that are going on in nerve cells that need to be explained, and that it gets to whether we have thoughts about things in an overall thoughts about the things that are going on, and even free will. So
free will. Huh.
Free will. Yeah. Most modern physicists don't believe there is such a thing as free will. That in fact, some have said that it's absurd, the idea that you have free will.
I think we should talk about that next time.
Oh no, really?
Yeah, because that would be a whole new topic.
Yeah, you betcha.
Okay.
You betcha.
I mean, you're right. Like, there are definitely physicists who say that we have no free will, which actually boggles my mind.
Well, I mean, we'll say, okay, let's do that. Let's do that. It was a good segue there. It's almost like,
indeed.
Yeah.
So speaking of segues, I got so our show producer a little while back has reminded me that for some reason I've neglected a very important part, which is talking about the weird stuff.
Aliens.
So,
aliens,
exactly. So speaking of aliens, I figured that I read a bit of some personal accounts, not my personal account. This is on the website, from the website Newforce, NUFORC.org. So this is the National UFO Reporting Center. So anybody who, if you see something or something weird happens, you could submit it, and it will be, assuming I think they have fairly low standards in terms of your spelling and grammar. From what I see, they do. So then it's put up. It's actually kind of interesting how it's organized, because it has their clearance, like what time you saw it, where it is, and what shape it is, and how long it is, like the duration. All right. So one of them goes like this. This one was actually fairly descriptive, and it occurred on September 4th, 2020, in York County, Virginia. The shape is apparently other. Duration is 1 to 2 seconds. So here's what this person said.
Let's see it.
Well, I was going to read it.
Let's hear it.
All right. I was heading back from it. I like this because it's like a story. I was heading back from a friend's house, coming back into York County from Newport News, and I was pulling up to the first stop intersection that has Kiln Creek on the left and Burger King on the right. This was around 3:20 in the morning. The area was quite open, being an 8-lane road with a single-story business and a mid-sized man-made lake that parallels the road. Suddenly, a bright flash caught my eye. I immediately looked to my left, and about 400 to 600 feet above the tree lines, a big, semi-capsize, what appeared to be an orange, translucent cube with its edges glowing plasma white was there. The sky was extremely clear at that moment, and it looked like it shot out of nothing, slowly rotated about 2 times, while leaving a small white trail similar to a shooting star. Then proceeded to blast off about 3 to 5 miles and disappeared back into nothing. I've seen several UFOs before, much further up in the sky, and and they had traditional shapes, but this thing was unlike anything I had seen. Its proximity, shape, and speed was completely foreign. It almost seemed like it jumped in through a portal and then immediately left after 2 seconds. Anyway, I just wanted to report this to potentially get info in the future for similar sightings, and maybe someone sees this report and saw the same thing. Okay, so that was weird. Leonard, have you ever seen
weird.
anything like that? That sounds like a
No,
non-traditional UFO.
It does. It doesn't sound like those are not the Greys. That's not their ship. It's some other. That's some other ship. Yeah. I'm always.
Mhm.
I was
Sorry,
just
go
gonna say, I'm always afraid that, like the alien civilization in Independence Day is gonna come through. It's like an alien biker gang that comes in and just wants to.
That's hilarious.
Right.
Speaking of the more traditional one, let me just read one more quickly. This one I found interesting because the guy who reported is actually a retired aerospace engineer. So this took place on September 3rd, 2020, Granbury, Texas. Lasted 5 to 6 seconds. So here's what he said.
Granbury.
Yep. I was watching the eastern sky by Lake Granbury, and almost every night I see shooting stars. So thought this was one, but it was far closer. It slowed down, traveled through the clouds, and shot out the sky at an accelerated rate going from the south to the north, having 4 miles of air travel. It was no plane. I'm also a retired aerospace engineer, and I know of no experimental aircraft that could do that. It had a slightly greenish glow. Never seen anything like it. There was a commercial aircraft off in the northeastern distance that might have seen this. Looked like it was heading into Dallas-Fort Worth. I have no images. Everything, it was all too fast. Well,
sounds credible.
No images, though. Yeah, I guess these things are too fast. So I'm just going to let you know that last year, Leonard, I actually saw something also that was really weird, that traveled really fast, could not capture it. It was just like, did not seem like an airplane. I don't know what it was. So, speaking of which, it goes back to the saying here, since we're coming to the conclusion of our show. Basically, Leonard, do you remember?
Yeah, it's something about something in the sky. Looking at something. I don't know. Am I close?
You're close. You're close.
Yeah. Because you'll never know if you might find some change on the ground. I don't know. All
right.
What is it?
It is look up because you never know what you will see. And with that,
Yep, I gotta remember that.
We're gonna have to conclude the show. You've been listening to SG2 on Space. Follow me, facebook.com/Station Show. Or go on YouTube, look up SG2 on Space. There will be a whole playlist of all the episodes we've done so far. Support me, patreon.com/SG2 on Space. Next week, we will talk about free will and how physics says it doesn't exist. So,
yeah, okay, that'll be a challenge.
That would be.
Bye.
All right.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.